Howdy, Banjo Ben. Here at BanjoBenClark.com, this is your home for learning how to pick on the banjo, the mandolin, and the guitar. This week we're looking at one of those old standards that everybody has to know, right? Matter of fact, I couldn't hardly believe that I didn't have this up on the website already, but we're looking at Cripple Creek this week. But not only are we looking at Cripple Creek, we want to make sure that we're not up Cripple Creek without a paddle. So we're going to look at some very important things within my arrangement of Cripple Creek. I actually have two arrangements for you today. They're very, very similar, but there's something different about them that as a beginning banjo player, you really, really need to be aware of. And this is a problem that I see in a lot of my students that I teach via Skype or in person. It's when they don't recognize the difference between what I call 8th note ornaments and 16th note ornaments. They're two very different things, and many people get those confused, and it ends up affecting their playing. A lot of times I have students come to me and they always play with this galloping feel, with this swingy feel. And they can't get out of that. They can't play nice and straight. And one way that I fix that is to help them distinguish between an 8th note slide or a 16th note slide, or an 8th note pull-off versus 16th note pull-off, those types of things. So that's what we're going to look at today. We've got a complete arrangement of Cripple Creek using only 8th note ornaments. I'm going to explain to you exactly what that means. It'll make more sense. Then we have one using only 16th note ornaments. And whenever you get these two things distinguished in your mind as a banjo player, we can really take the next step to make our playing more regimented and just better. That's the only word I can think of. So let me play you our version of Cripple Creek. So what do you think? Could you tell the difference? Be honest with me. No fibbing here at BanjoBenClark.com. If you couldn't tell the difference, then you've got a lot to learn today, and it's going to be good stuff. If you could tell the difference, you're probably still going to learn a lot. A lot of you could probably hear the difference between those two versions, but maybe you're not able to tell me exactly what the difference was. But it's something that's very, very important, and I'm amazed that I see banjo players that are up playing intermediate and advanced material that don't know the difference between those two versions. What I want you to do, if you're watching here on the website, is jump on over to the banjo tabs, to the basic banjo tabs, and grab both the PDFs for the 8th note and the 16th note versions of Cripple Creek. And then we are going to dive right in, measure by measure, split screen, as we always do here, and explain the true difference between a 16th note and an 8th note ornament, being our slides, our pull-offs, and our hammer-ons. If you're watching this on YouTube, here in a little while, I'll ask you to jump on over to my website, where many of you have already done this. Thank you so much. And become a Gold Pick member and help support me as I put out this learning material each and every week. I think it's important to get a little bit of terminology out of the way. I want you as players to be actual musicians and to understand what you're doing, not just copy a bunch of stuff that I tell you to play. Just like flying an airplane, you have to do a little bit of ground school to get your license. You have to understand the fundamentals of what's happening so that later on, when things get more complex, you know what to do. So let's talk a little bit about what I mean exactly when I say an 8th note or a 16th note. We're talking about timing. And to a lot of you, you may already be familiar with this, but let's look at a typical measure. I'm just going to represent a measure with this box here. And a measure is just a unit of time that music is divided into. Now, as composers or as players, we can delegate however many or however much time we want into a particular measure. But a song can be made up of many measures just stacked right back to back with each other. And typically, in your normal songs, each one of these measures is going to equal the same amount of time. I like to think of it kind of like a calendar. You look at a calendar, it's got 30 or 31 days in it, but every one of those days has 24 hours in it. Think about how much it would throw us off if we had one day had 18 hours and the next day had 30 hours. Okay, that wouldn't make very much sense. And so it's the same way with time in our music and with our rhythm. Most of these songs that we're playing are in what's called 4/4 time. So you'll see that a lot of time on music looks like that. And what is that talking about? What that means, the top 4 means that there's 4 beats in every measure. So it's saying for each one of these squares or each one of these blocks of times, we're going to have 4 beats in there. The next 4 tells us what kind of note gets 1 beat. Okay, so this 4 down here tells us that a quarter note, okay, 1/4, 1/4, gets 1 beat. So if we have to have 4 beats in a measure and a quarter note gets 1 beat, how many quarter notes would fill up a measure? That's pretty simple, 4 of them, right? To make one whole measure. What does a quarter note look like? This will be review for some of you. For some of you, you're just now learning. But a quarter note typically, on standard notation, will be filled in and we'll have one stem coming off of it. It can either go down or up. Most of the time in tab, our stems go down. Also, we have other kinds of notes. Music would be very boring if it was just a bunch of quarter notes piled one against another. But if we were going to make up one measure of all quarter notes, we talked about there needing to be 4 beats in this measure, and a quarter note makes one of those beats. So if we wanted to fill this measure up, let's do it using 4 quarter notes. To forgive my lack of artistry here. That gives us our 4 beats that we need for that one measure. However, as I mentioned, there's lots of different types of notes, and we could subdivide this quarter note down into many other kinds of notes. It's very mathematical. What would happen if we divided this quarter note into 2? Okay, so we want 2 notes to take up the same amount of time that a quarter note takes up. Well, what's 1/4 divided by 2? 1/4 times 1/2 is essentially, well, the answer is an 1/8 note. An 1/8 note looks a lot like a quarter note, except on the end of its stem, it'll have a little flag. A lot of times you'll see the stem going up as well. And you're familiar with those types of notes. But it's going to take 2 1/8 notes to make 1 quarter note. Okay? So many times whenever we draw out 2 1/8 notes side by side, instead of having 2 individual flags, we'll tie them together with 1 bar. Boop. Just like that. So if we wanted to fill up this second measure here with 1/8 notes, how many would we have to have now to get our 4 beats? If it takes 2 of these to make 1 quarter note, we're going to have 8 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We could tie those together just like that. Now we have 2 measures here. Both are taking the exact same amount of time, 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. For our next measure, we count them with ands whenever we're talking about 1/8 notes. Same beats here. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Same amount of time goes by. Did you know that we can even subdivide these down even more? So this is a quarter note. This is an 1/8 note. So where would we go next if we wanted to divide an 1/8 note in 2? You guessed it. 16th notes. Now, how many 16th notes would it take to make an 1/8 note? 2. Good job. We'll tie them together. But that looks exactly like 1/8 notes. So what do we do to distinguish a 16th note from an 1/8 note? Well, what we tend to do is put a double bar line to tie them together. That lets me know with these 2 bar lines that we have 16th notes rather than 1/8 notes. So how many 16th notes would it take to fill up a full measure of 4 beats? It would take 16. Now I'm going to save myself the trouble from drawing this out. But the point is that we can take combinations of all these different types of notes and put them into a measure. And that's what today's lesson is about. Whenever we're doing these slides and these hammer-ons and these pull-offs, it's important to know, are we dealing with a 16th note rhythm, or are we dealing with an eighth note rhythm? Because that's going to vastly change the way that it sounds. Now let's look at the first measure of the eighth note version of Cripple Creek, and I think it'll help you understand what exactly is going on now that you know some of the terminology. But I want to just start there in measure 1 like we always do. And we're going to start on the last beat of the first measure, so on that 4th beat with a pinch, 2nd fret of our 1st string there. And we're going to play both that string and our high 5th string at the same time. Then we're going to slide up with our left hand to the 5th fret. Can you do that? Once we get up there, we're going to pinch them both again. 2nd.